From cancer-inducing chemicals to ingredients used in rat tests, these are 7 bread brands you shouldn't be eating, and 2 healthy ones you should consider. First up, we have a brand that uses your childhood memories to sell you chemicals. 7. Schmidt's Old Time. The name is clever marketing. They use a vintage font and a spelling of time that suggests a simpler, more honest era of baking. But there is nothing old-fashioned about Schmidt's. In fact, it's one of the most chemically aggressive brands on the shelf. Many of their varieties contain potassium bromate. This is a flour improver that makes dough more elastic and easier for machines to handle. It is also a known carcinogen. It's banned in Europe, Canada, and China. The FDA urges bakers not to use it, but because it saves time and money, Schmidt's keeps it in the mix. They also have some of the highest sodium levels in the industry. Their 647 wheat bread has 240 milligrams of sodium per slice. It's a recipe for hypertension disguised as a tradition. Another example of a company using nostalgia and clever marketing to deceive you is Wonder Bread. 6. Wonder Bread. This is the ultimate example of industrial foam. Wonder Bread built an empire on the idea that it builds strong bodies 12 ways. In reality, it's a chemistry project. The primary offender here is azodicarbonamide. If that sounds familiar, it's because it's the same chemical used to manufacture yoga mats and the soles of sneakers. When heated, it breaks down into semicarbazide, which is unsurprisingly linked to cancer. Wonder Bread is made using the Chorleywood process. Traditionally, bread takes 12 to 18 hours to ferment, which allows the yeast to break down the gluten and makes it digestible. The Chorleywood process uses high-speed mixers and chemical catalysts to force the bread to rise in under 3 hours. This is why you feel bloated after eating it. Basically, your gut is trying to finish the job the baker skipped. It also contains alloxin, a byproduct of the bleaching process that researchers literally use to induce diabetes in lab rats. But the marketing frauds don't stop there. 5. Nature's Own. This brand is a masterclass in deceptive packaging. They use soft greens, images of wheat fields, and the word nature to make you feel safe. But legally, natural means absolutely nothing. If you check the back of a Nature's Own loaf, you'll often find datum. This is short for diacetyl tartaric acid esters of mono and diglycerides. This synthetic emulsifier is used to keep the bread from falling apart, but it's been shown to disrupt gut flora and contribute to leaky gut syndrome. They also use high-fructose corn syrup, or HFCS. As we all know, syrup isn't something that any bread really needs in its production, raising the question, why? HFCS is added specifically to trigger the dopamine receptors in your brain, so you keep coming back for more. It's an addictive additive that's a primary driver of fatty liver disease. But hold your breath, because as you'll see, things get even worse down the line. 4. Arnold or Oro Wheat. Arnold markets itself as the premium whole grain choice. They talk a lot about 100% whole wheat. Here's the catch: it's often reconstituted. In a real whole grain process, you grind the whole kernel. Arnold often takes the wheat apart, separating the bran, the germ, and the endosperm, then dumps some of the bran and germ back into white flour later. This destroys the natural nutrition synergy of the grain. To make this flour taste good, they load it with sugar. If sugar is one of the top 3 ingredients in your healthy whole wheat bread, you're essentially eating a slice of wheat-flavored cake. 3. Sara Lee. Sara Lee sells you on texture and its premium status as well. Nobody does it like Sara Lee because it's impossibly soft. But that's exactly the truth, because if you're doing it naturally, it's impossible to be that soft. That's the red flag. Real bread has a crust and a varied internal structure. Sara Lee is uniform because it's loaded with soybean oil. Soybean oil is an inflammatory nightmare. It's packed with omega-6 fatty acids. Humans evolved on a 1-to-1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. The modern American diet is closer to 20-to-1. This imbalance is the foundation of chronic inflammation. which leads to everything from heart disease to Alzheimer's. Furthermore, unless it's organic, that soy is almost certainly GMO and saturated in glyphosate. Now, let's take a look at the luxury bread brand. 2. Pepperidge Farm. Pepperidge Farm positions itself as a luxury brand. The packaging is sophisticated, the font is classic, and the price is double what you'd pay for a store brand. You assume that a higher price equals better ingredients, right? Well, it doesn't. If you compare the label of Pepperidge Farm's Farmhouse White to a budget loaf, the differences are negligible. You're still getting the soybean oil, the calcium propionate, which is by the way linked to ADHD in children, and the synthetic emulsifiers. You aren't paying for a better flour, but you probably are paying for the fancy paper bag it comes in. They even use caramel coloring in some breads, which can contain 4-MeI, a potential carcinogen. But now that we've taken a look at the faults of the luxury brand, let's take a look at the other side of the bread shelf. But before that, just a reminder to like and subscribe to get more videos like this. Generic store brands like Great Value, Kroger, and others. When you see a loaf of bread for 99 cents or even 50 cents, you have to ask yourself how that is possible. Wheat costs money, milling costs money, and obviously shipping costs money. The only way to sell a loaf that cheap is to use rejected wheat, which was bought at a huge discount. This is the wheat that didn't meet the standards for higher-end production. It's often higher in contaminants and lower in protein. To make this low-grade flour look like bread, they use modified wheat starch and massive amounts of preservatives. Store-brand bread will often stay fresh on your counter for 3 weeks. If a biological product doesn't rot, it's because it's been treated so heavily with chemicals that even bacteria won't touch it. If the bacteria won't eat it, why should you? Now, after going through the brands that are failing you, let's look at what bread brands are supposed to be. There are 2 brands you can usually find in a standard grocery store that actually prioritize your biology over their bottom line. 1. Ezekiel 4:9. Food for life. This is the gold standard. While almost every other brand on this list starts by grinding grain into a fine powder, which is supposed to be flour, Ezekiel doesn't use flour at all. They use sprouted living grains. They take wheat, barley, millet, and spelt, along with lentils and soybeans, and they soak them until they actually start to grow. Why does this matter? Sprouting a grain changes its chemistry. It breaks down anti-nutrients like phytic acid, which normally prevents your body from absorbing minerals. It also makes the protein more bioavailable and spikes the vitamin content. And because it's made from sprouted legumes and grains, it's a complete protein. It has a glycemic index of about 36. Now compare that to white bread, which sits around 75. It won't send your insulin into the clouds. You'll find this in the freezer section because it has 0 preservatives. If you leave it on the counter, it'll actually go bad in a few days. Exactly what real food is supposed to do. 2. Dave's Killer Bread. Dave Dahl's story is famous. He spent 15 years in prison before returning to his family's bakery to create something better. His bread proves that you can make a commercially viable loaf without poisoning the customer. The most important thing here is the USDA organic seal. That means no GMOs and, crucially, no glyphosate. Standard wheat in the US is often sprayed with glyphosate right before harvest to dry it out. Dave's avoids that. Their 21 whole grains and seeds loaf is dense, requires actual chewing, and is packed with 5 grams of fiber and protein per slice. They use cultured wheat as a natural preservative instead of the synthetic stuff that messes with your gut. It's a bit more expensive, but you're paying for actual nutrition, not industrial fillers. At this point, we've let all this happen, so paying the price seems like the only thing we can do. Or is it? We have to stop trusting the front of the bag. Remember, the front is for the marketing department and the back is for the truth. If it has more than 10 items at the back, or if you see things like azodicarbonamide, potassium bromate, or datum, put it back.